Alright, what's going on, folks? I'm just gonna take some time here to review the structure of the atom with you all. So what I have up on the screen here is a model of an atom. And we're just gonna kind of review what the different parts of the atom are, and how we can use that to find out some information about the atom. So first off, I just want you to remember here that this central part of the atom is called the nucleus. Right? So you can go ahead and fill in nucleus here on your notes. These rings that circle around the nucleus are called orbitals. So the center part is called the nucleus. The rings around the nucleus are called orbitals. Okay, and then the next thing we're going to do is talk about the three types of particles that make up an atom. Right, so the first type is this one in the nucleus here. That's called the proton. This sort of orangish reddish one. Proton has a mass of 1 atomic mass unit, or 1 AMU. So go ahead and fill that in on your note sheet. Proton, mass of 1 AMU. It has a charge of +1. Remember that we don't include units when we're talking about the charge of an atom. And it's located in the nucleus, in that central part. Second type of particle that we're talking about is the electron. Right? So that would be one of these guys out in the orbital out here. The electrons do not have a mass. Their mass is 0 AMU. They do actually have a mass, but they're so much smaller than protons and neutrons that we just say that it's easier just to think about them as having no mass. Their charge is -1, and again, there's no units there. And their location is in the orbital, so we find the electrons orbiting the nucleus in these little circles, in these little orbitals. So they're kind of orbiting around the outside of the nucleus. Okay, and then the last type of particle, it's going to be this green one in the middle here. That's the neutron. Neutron has a mass of 1 AMU, so just like a proton, 1 AMU. They have no charge. That's because they are neutral, so their charge is 0. And they're located in the nucleus, so they're located with the protons. Okay, and so then if we know how many protons, neutrons, and electrons an atom has, we can determine three things, three different pieces of information about that atom. So the first thing that we can determine is the number of protons. That will help us to determine the atomic number. And so that's that number on the periodic table. And we'll go over this a little bit more in a second here when we go over an example. So essentially, if you know how many protons an atom has, you can identify which element it is. Okay, next up is the charge. The charge is the number of protons minus the number of electrons. And the reason why we do that is because protons have a positive charge and electrons have a negative charge. Right? So if we take all the protons, all the positive charges, and subtract all the electrons, all the negative charges, number of protons minus number of electrons will give us the charge of the atom. And then last up is the mass. The mass is going to be the number of protons plus the number of neutrons, because those are the two types of particles with a mass, protons and neutrons. Remember that electrons don't really have a mass. We say that their mass is 0. And your mass is just your number of protons plus your number of neutrons. So we're just adding those two figures together to get the mass of the atom. Okay, so let's go through a couple of examples. So here I have an example. This atom has 6 protons, 7 neutrons, and 6 electrons. And so you can count those out in the atom if you want to. Okay, and so then first thing would be the atomic number. And again, that is just the number of protons. So since we have 6 protons, the atomic number is 6. Okay, and so then to figure out what element this is, we're going to look at the periodic table for which element has atomic number 6. So if I look at the periodic table and I go and look at these numbers across the top here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, carbon is atomic number 6. So carbon is the element that we're looking at here. And so then we can go ahead and write in that our element is carbon. Next up, we're going to find the mass. Remember that mass is number of protons plus your number of neutrons. So we have 6 protons and 7 neutrons, 6 plus 7. So our mass is going to be 6 protons plus 7 neutrons to give us a mass of 13 atomic mass units, or 13 AMU. Don't forget to include the unit when you write this. Okay, and then last up is the charge. And remember that the charge is the number of protons minus the number of electrons. So we're going to take the number of protons, 6, and subtract the number of electrons, 6. 6 minus 6 would get us 0. So this atom has a charge of 0. And remember that we call that a neutral atom. I'm not going to be assessing you on that today, but tomorrow you're going to need to know that term. So if an atom has a charge of 0, it is a neutral atom. Okay, let's go through one more example, and then I'll let you do some practice problems. So example 2, we can see that this atom has 1, 2, 3 protons, 1, 2, 3, 4 neutrons, and 1, 2 electrons. So atomic number, that's just our number of protons, so this one's going to have an atomic number of 3. Figure out what element it is, we're going to need to take that 3 and find it on the periodic table. So if I look at the periodic table, I'm looking for the element, and I'm going to look up above here with atomic number 3. So that would be lithium. Mass, that's just your number of protons plus your number of neutrons, so 3 plus 4. That should get us to an atomic mass of 7. And then last up, the charge. The charge is just your number of protons minus your number of electrons. So for charge, that would be 3 protons minus 2 electrons, which would be a charge of plus 1. Remember that when the charge is not 0, so when it's either positive or negative, we call it an ion. So this atom would be an ion. Because it has a positive charge, we would say that it is a positive ion. If it had a negative charge, it would be a negative ion. Okay, and so then what you're going to do is the same thing as what we just did in these 2 examples right here. You're going to go through 4 different problems that I put at the end of your assignment here. You're going to take these atoms, you're going to list the atomic number, the element, the mass, and the charge, just in the same way that I did in the 2 examples. So if you're confused on what you're doing here, look at what we did in the 2 examples. It'll be the same steps to follow. And there's 4 different problems here. So one of them has 2 protons, 2 neutrons, 2 electrons. One of them has 4 protons, 5 neutrons, 2 electrons. One has 7 protons, 8 neutrons, 7 electrons. Last one has 8 protons, 8 neutrons, 10 electrons. So go ahead and work through those problems. If you have any questions, feel